This is Peter,
And this is Tom.
and you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcasts. All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Reska, and welcome back to our podcast. Tommy, what are we talking about?
Well, based on our last podcast dealing with the Ukraine and talking about kind of history there's a lot of other fear going on. You've seen a lot of articles being written about a fear of a possible nuclear exchange that could happen
I like how you put that
between
exchange.
nuclear exchange. Yeah, no,
Like they're handing each other gifts.
well, that's what it's called, a nuclear exchange. I mean, one country does it. So basically, look at a little bit of a history of nuclear weapons and what the nations that have them, a little bit of like how they were developed, why they were developed, the different types that were developed, where they are today, which I think a lot of people would be interesting to notice. Because
Yeah, who has them? Who can use them?
who has them and where they are? Because that's another thing too. There's nations that have them. There's nations that host them, which is also something of different, and just kind of like the instance in time, some of the different tests that they did. Just to give a quick thing, like one nuclear weapon detonated over New York City, the idea is it would cause over 3,160 estimated fatalities. Because
looks
one of
like a
these
big
single
number.
warheads, they could kill hundreds of thousands of people and instantly. And you have the lasting, devastating humanitarian and environmental consequences it would have. So
Yeah.
this basically is, if you take all the countries in the world, there's an estimated total of roughly 13,000 nuclear weapons, and most of them are many, many times more powerful than the ones dropped on Hiroshima.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, my God. So
they,
much more powerful than
the,
what
the ones dropped on Hiroshima are in Nagasaki
Archaic. They're
were
archaic.
nothing compared to the type that they have today. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, I guess, difference between an A bomb and an H bomb, right?
Pure fission weapons, boosted fission weapons,
You know,
staged thermonuclear weapons. I mean,
how
there's
they deployment. So we're not trying to scare people. There's not no one wants a nuclear war, but we're just we're not really talking about nuclear war as much as why
the
they're out there
weapons,
and
the history of it.
deterrence, the weapons of them themselves, because it's a unique thing if you think about it. Because then since 1945, humanity basically has a means to destroy itself.
Yep.
So that's something that you got to it's in our own power to wipe ourselves out with these weapons.
And you mentioned that there's about 13,000, right? But if you look at the numbers, I guess we just get this out of the way before we kind of backtrack and talk about the history of how we got to this point. But if you look at the numbers, they are mostly United States and Russia.
And Russia,
that
Russia has
possess them.
more, I believe, right? Well, they
Yes,
have
Russia
more.
has more than the U.S.
They have more right now, I believe, right?
Yeah, we're number 2. So Russia has 6,255 nuclear
That we know.
warheads, and we'll get into what that means, going forward. But the United States has 5,500. I think it's 5,550 nuclear warheads. And then behind that, so just a comparison, like Russia has over 6,000, we have over 5,000. And then the third in line is China with 350 nuclear warheads. Then it's
France has like
France.
290.
Yep.
United Kingdom 225. So it's a little bit different. Pakistan has over 100. India.
India, Israel, yes and no. They have 90 nuclear warheads, but there's like some controversy. Like,
Yeah, but they're like,
do they not?
how they got it? Are they in their control? Are they in the United States control? Like the operation
Exactly.
control? We know that. We believe North Korea has about 45
Yeah,
weapons.
then they think like even the ones they have, we're not sure if they have them built, but they have the capability.
The capability, and we're not sure they might have them. We're not sure of their deployment capabilities, which is also a
Exactly.
big thing. You can have a nuclear bomb, and being able to build a nuclear bomb is one thing. Being able to deploy it is something very different.
But that's
And
it.
even though the United States
Those are only
has,
countries.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, there's 9, but then
Yep.
there's a bunch around the world too. I guess you want to do that now or talk
Yeah,
about
we
that
just get it
now.
out of the way, and then
So there's also 5 states hosting nuclear weapons. You have Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. They all host U.S. nuclear weapons. So the United States is like, listen, we maintain operational control of these weapons, but they're stationed in these countries and they help U.S. nuclear war planning.
Yeah.
So they're basically there, and that's one of the things that kind of started a lot of this issues in the Ukraine. If you look at the Russian argument, right, because they're basically essentially nuclear weapons out there on their doorstep in some of those countries are very close, and it just gives us more of a first strike or defensive strike capability.
Yeah. All right, so let's backtrack, Tom. Let's talk about how we got here. I mean, the one logical place to start when it comes to talking about nuclear weapons actually deals with the atomic bomb, and that goes back to early 1940s, where you have the very known today, and even at the time, very known Albert Einstein
Yeah.
writes a letter to President FDR in the United States. And in this letter, he states that he has information that Germany and German physicists are in a process of trying to break up an atom, which will cause a chain reaction and ultimately release massive amounts of energy.
Massive,
And
yeah.
yes, and the idea here is this is designed. The physicists are really trying to break the atom for good purposes. They're trying to create clean, powerful energy. However, what Einstein tells FDR is that the Germans are trying to take that energy and convert that and make that into a bomb. So with that
Let's just say it's
suggestion,
not just the Germans; it's the Nazis. Let's get that
Nazis.
clear. Like
Yeah, let's get
these
that
are
out of the way. Yeah,
Nazis, so you can think of a Nazis having a nuclear weapon, and that's basically what
exactly.
Einstein is talking about. If the Nazis have this type of weapon, it's not going to be good. And he says, "Listen, they're going to be working on it. We should do it too."
Yep. And then FDR actually offers him the job. Like, all right, you want to spearhead this thing? And Einstein's like, no, I don't want no part of this. Like, I'm chilling. What we do is we create the top secret Manhattan Project, which you probably guys remember learning about in school. This Manhattan Project, again, super top secret.
This is in August of 1942, just to give like
Yep.
kind of like a
Context.
time span context. So America's at war. The Japanese have
Yes.
bombed Pearl Harbor, right? We're at war. World War II is in full swing. You have everything going on in Russia, right? Everything going on in Germany. But so we're building this bomb, and it's considered at the time like a race, right? That we're racing the Germans. We have to do this before the Germans finish one. And there were other countries looking at this too. We find out later on Japan was even looking at making a nuclear weapon. They were not as far ahead as the United States were, because FDR invested a lot of money. I forget exactly what it was, but it was a lot of like billions of dollars by today's standards. This was in the 1940s. He's putting
so the Manhattan Project,
Los Alamos, New Mexico,
it employed more than 130,000 people and cost nearly $2 billion back then, which is equivalent to about $23 billion in today's money. To try to create this, and it takes better part of 3-4 years to get this going.
Yeah, well, they eventually make the first ever successful atomic explosion on July 16th, 1945, the first ever successful nuclear test.
Yep.
And they make a 15
Trinity.
to 20 kiloton nuclear weapon, right? They detonate it in New Mexico. It's still actually they have a plaque at the site, I believe, right? Yep. The radiation is actually 10 times higher than natural, still there at that time.
And this was known as the Trinity test, right?
Yeah, the Trinity test. It goes off. You probably see a lot of the images online as far as like people
the fire bombs and whatnot,
or the explosion, and you have Oppenheimer's famous words, right? That I've become death, destroyer of worlds, is that Hindu text.
Yep.
When he talks about that, because like a lot of the scientists are all like shaking hands, they're so excited what they just did, and a lot of them right later on, like they didn't kind of realize, oh my God, what did we just do?
Yep.
Like
again, they were thinking in terms of like we're creating energy. This is taking like theoretical physics.
They knew, but they knew they were making a bomb.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. But the government is giving them, the government's giving them funding that they always wanted. And as far as they're concerned, like this is the first time that you're getting $2 billion you would have never gotten from the government to create this technology.
But also, exactly. Make this. But look at the date, right? This is July 1945. The war in Europe is over.
Yep.
So that was a lot. That was a big thing there too. Well, when VE Day happened, a lot of the scientists were like, all right, well, and they were surprised that the military still wanted to keep on trying to make this bomb. And they're like, well, why? The Germans didn't make it. And they're finding out that they weren't even close to making one. So and that could be a future podcast, I guess, talk about the Nazi atomic bomb, right? That's something that you see out there.
That's a cool one.
But they're like, why?
So what happens, right? So we have it. We have the weapons, right?
We have it, yes. So there's a lot of debate, and that's a whole other issue, right? Debate whether or not to use this. But the idea is we spent all this money, right? We have it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to use it. Okay?
And we are still, to this day, the only nation to use an atomic weapon against a people.
In war, against someone else. The only time it's ever been used against any other population.
History of the world.
Now, both countries, the United States, if you could actually look this up on YouTube, there's an interesting video. It shows every single atomic explosion on the history of the planet. It shows like all the countries that do it and where it happens, and it really heats. And they show them like in order and the size, and it really goes crazy during the 60s, obviously.
Oh yeah.
So the United States detonates a lot more than anybody else. We detonate
100%.
over 1,000. I think Russia doesn't even come close to that number.
Yeah.
Actually, they build a lot, but they don't detonate them.
Yeah.
We're testing, we're detonating, we're finding things out. But the first one is obviously dropped on Hiroshima, August 6, 1945. It's a uranium bomb, and it kills 140,000 people within a few months, and many more die later on from radiation illness. Then August 9th, 1945, the second one is dropped. An estimated 74,000 people died by the end of the 1945. And that's a plutonium-based bomb. So they're kind of seeing which one works differently at different methods. What, Little Man and Fat Boy, I believe, right? Or is it the other way around?
No, you're right. It's the first one is Little Man and the other one's Fat Boy. It's Little Boy and Fat Man. Little Boy being the first one.
Yeah, so they dropped them, and they devastating effects, and people are shocked because you have to understand, like, we grew up at a different time, even us, and we're a little bit older than maybe some people listening, but we grew up right. We knew of atomic weapons.
Yeah.
If you had no idea, if you're not a scientist, you don't know about atomic weapons, and suddenly you find out that the war is over, and it's over because of an atomic bomb. One bomb caused all this devastation. They're used to seeing 500 bombers, dropping firebombs and stuff like that. Yeah. Conventional bombing, not this nuclear. And they didn't even have any idea. They knew of radiation, but didn't fully understand radiation also at this time, fully, you know? So it was a lot of what ifs and trying to understand scenarios. To go back to just the Trinity test, I'm sure you can look this up and you can read about it. It's interesting. A lot of the scientists were actually taking bets that it was a small possibility. I'm sure you saw the speech that they thought that
crack the Earth's crust.
It could crack the Earth's crust or ignite the oxygen in the atmosphere and set the entire planet afire.
Yeah. And they were like, let's still press this button.
They kind of did some math and said, it shouldn't happen. It's a very small chance, but even if it's a very small chance of it combusting all the oxygen on the planet at the exact same time, it's probably not, I don't know. But they do it. It happens, but it's one of those things. No. But shortly after that, just give a little hindsight, in January 24th, 1946, the UN actually calls for an elimination of atomic weapons.
Yep, I did see that.
And they set up a commission to address nuclear weapons. So at this point, we say no because we're the only country that has them.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the big thing for a while. It's not for long because obviously, the Soviets get one pretty soon after that. By 1946, they have their own. They detonate their own. It is basically from stealing United States.
Well, 49. I thought it was 1949 that USSR's
49, first successful. August 29, 1949.
Yep. First successful atomic bomb test. Basically, no more monopoly for United States nuclear weapons.
And that's going to start the arms race. That's starting the arms race officially, you could say.
Yeah.
Right? The Cold War probably starts sooner, but the arms race now, they have the atomic bomb too. Now, all right, what's going on here? So I don't know, you want to talk about...
Yeah, I mean, let's kind of get into this arms race, right? I mean, the premise here, arms race, the idea of an arms race has been around for pretty much ever. It's this, it's this idea of just like countries increasing the size and quality of the military resources, and they're trying to gain some form of military and political superiority. So, before atomic weapons, it was the Industrial Revolution brought about dreadnoughts, right? That was the whole thing of...
That was a big thing, yeah.
France, Russia building powerful navies, Royal Navy and dreadnoughts. And it was always something about making better technology. All of it obviously changed. We're not talking about ships anymore once we have atomic weapons. And what essentially starts to happen here is once the USSR has this first successful atomic bomb in 1949, first of all, we're like, how did they get this information? Which leads to this idea of spies within the United States. It's a, Red Scare, McCarthyism. We mentioned a little bit of this in our 1950s podcast, but UK actually carries their own nuclear tests in Western Australia within a year by 1950. So the United States now is like, all right, we don't have the monopoly anymore. We're no longer have that one thing that other people would fear, especially since Russia has their own. So we go back to work. Let's make it bigger. Let's make it better. And what happens?
Do that.
1952, right?
1952, November 1st, the U.S. tests the first hydrogen bomb, and it detonates the first hydrogen bomb in the Marshall Islands, and it's 500 times more powerful than the Nagasaki bomb.
Yeah.
And doing some research, what I found out, they basically say you have to have an atom bomb first. Basically, a H bomb is an atom bomb on steroids. And it's basically, you need the atomic bomb is almost like the fuse for the hydrogen bomb to give you an idea of the yield and the power that these things have. And they detonate it, and they're called a super, and the Soviet Union's going to detonate theirs.
Oh, within a year.
Within a year. So, I mean, that's when we know it. They're definitely they're definitely doing sorts of that. Yeah, they're doing those sorts of things. And we start detonating them a lot after this. You have the massive Bravo testing, right, in the Bikini Atoll Islands in the Pacific Ocean, contaminating a Japanese fishing boat that's nearby, the Lucky Dragon, right? A lot of residents on some islands. Some islands get just obliterated. They just wiped off the map
Map
during this
literally like
time.
the little dots gone off the map because we tested an
Just
H bomb.
vaporized because we're using these H bombs in the area, and we're kind of seeing out like if you detonate him underwater, what happens? You detonate him if you drop it and have That's the thing too. People think that it hits the ground. No, these always detonate in the air because that
Always in the
makes
air
it
above.
even more of a yield. Like they actually put parachutes. All right,
Yeah.
like a lot of times the parachutes is just so that the plane dropping it can get away, and that's how these
Yeah.
are all being detonated for the most part. These are being airdropped from planes. That's a plan at this moment in
Yeah.
the 50s. That's
Yeah,
going to change
that's
a
what
little
we
bit
need to
too.
highlight. Yeah, this is still you need to put this on a plane and drop.
Plane
It's still a
and
bomb.
fly it there and fly
Yeah.
it there. And
Yep.
there's very few planes that can do that, and that's why it's still big for the United States because yeah, right, Russia has its bombs too, but they don't really have a way for the bombs to get to the U.S. where we have bases in Europe that theoretically, if we were going to bomb them, we could do. And this is what is driving the Soviets crazy
Yep.
because we have first strike capabilities against them. They don't necessarily have that against us.
Yeah. So essentially, in 1953, USSR tested, like we said, hydrogen bomb, and just to kind of reiterate, this is thousands times stronger than atomic weapons. And then in 1955, during the Eisenhower presidency, the United States publishes what is known as massive retaliation. It's a doctrine of massive retaliation. And basically, what it does, it states that any attack on the United States or any of its allies, for that matter, would be met with incredibly destructive force. So we're basically making it known to the rest of the world that any form of aggression towards us will be met with our biggest military capabilities, which at the time was basically it was a nuclear strategy. Like we're committing ourselves to retaliate with using
Yeah,
nukes.
and a lot of that was because they knew that if a ground war erupted in Europe at the time, they couldn't. Soviets had too many tanks, basically, right? If they wanted to
Yeah,
cross into West Germany and West Berlin, they could do it. So our
yeah,
deterrent was let's have more nuclear weapons because that's the only way we're going to be able to counter that in the beginning. You also have in '55 Einstein, right, and another scientist by the name of Bertrand Russell. They issue a warning. He kind of regrets what he did in the '40s,
yep.
Einstein, and he urges all governments to resolve disputes peacefully without using nuclear weapons because they're like, this isn't going to be useful. And that's when he says that quote,
The World War
they
Three,
ask him
right?
what weapons will be used in World War III. And he says, I don't know, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Yeah,
Basically saying how we're going to be, destroyed and sent back down to the Stone Age with
yeah.
this. Because it's a real fear now. People are seeing this. Nuclear weapons have only been around for about 10 years. But they're seeing like, listen, these things can wipe out everything.
Entire
Which
cities with 1 second, boom, done.
1 second, one bomb, one plane, if it gets through. And now that these leaders are using this as like a military strategy, like they're planning, all right, well, if we have to use it, these are the targets we're going to hit. This is what we're going to do. This is how the damage is going to cause. And it's just,
Well, that's what
people
when you
are
watch the
afraid.
when yeah, and when you start seeing these public announcement videos, you guys have probably seen these on YouTube where they basically build full houses and
Yeah.
little suburban neighborhoods in the middle of like Nevada desert, and they set up cameras to kind of see the impact of a nuclear, whether they were atomic at the time or hydrogen at this point, bombs, or what they would actually do to real structures. Like, how would this bomb behave in a suburban environment? And this was like super scary.
And you see these things catch on fire. They actually, I think
Yeah,
they put goats in there too, and they just bomb goats
that's nuts.
just to see, because they're just trying to see the effects of radiation. They're trying to see what it was. If you ever watch Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skulls, right? That's
Yeah,
that
that's
like
where
controversial
he
scene.
hides in a refrigerator.
Fridge, yeah, which I don't think would work. Even if
Yeah,
it's
it's not
lead
gonna
lined
happen.
fridge, it's just
Yeah,
the fallout there is going to be crazy. But
that's
anyway, it's
not the best Indiana. But all right, 1957. This is when things start to get a little scary and a little more modern to where we are. And actually, it's we're talking about the arms race between Soviet Union and the United States to get the bigger, better weapon. But simultaneously, we also set off what is known as a space race because what happens is in 1957, in order to launch the first satellite into space, right, Sputnik 1, Soviet Union develops a rocket. The same rocket, all of a sudden, brought this Sputnik into space, is also capable of carrying an atomic warhead thousands
yeah.
of miles away without having to fly anywhere and drop a conventional bomb. Now you could literally put it on a rocket. So this
This is
meant
going to
that,
lead to the
oh yeah,
ICBMs, right?
exactly. So that means that USSR basically just created in '57 the first ever intercontinental ballistic missile, a
And that
missile that
changes
could
things.
travel and bring atoms, nuclear weapons to anywhere. It changes
They
everything.
don't have the system, but it's there in theory now. They don't have
In
the
theory,
system.
exactly.
That's not going to be there yet because there's some other things that happened before that because they don't have that technology yet, but it's there. And again, that's not an easy technology to have. It's also going to reduce the size of the warhead, which is probably a good thing if you're going to use them.
Yeah.
It's different now. Now they have massive ICBMs with massive warheads that, you don't even know the type of
Yeah.
yields that they could have, which I'm sure we'll talk to in a little bit.
Well, and then what happens here is you have the United States actually starts thinking about this because, I mean, again, this could be a podcast. We say this all the time, but our entire rocket program is based off of former Nazis that we basically stole at the end of World War II. It was like a a race rather, to get these former rocket scientists that were developing the V1 and V2 rockets for Hitler. And while the Soviets got some, we got some of those scientists as well and brought them back to our respective countries and trying to develop this rocket technology. The United States actually in 1958 tests our own ICBM. So within 1 year, we're like, all right, like, we're trying as well to make it into space, not as successfully, obviously, as the Russians. We know that until we win the whole thing in '69. But at the time, United States starts to test officially with intercontinental ballistic missiles by
And what we also
1958.
have, we're also doing at this time, we decided to have like threefold, right? So you need to have the Air Force, so we have a lot of bombers, right?
Yep.
Again, Russia's going to have more bombs, but we have more means. I don't want to say the United States has more means of deploying them, right?
Yep.
So you have the air bombers, you have the ICBMs. They're also working on the SLBMs, which are submerged missiles from like the submarines.
Yep.
Which is a whole different thing. The idea is we can send a submarine somewhere off the coast, right?
They're known as Polaris submarines.
Polaris submarines with Trident missiles, right? And those things are just going to be the same thing. Like they're going to cause a lot of damage because you can never track them. So the idea is, all right, like the military bases, they can be bombed. Our missile silos, if they find out where they are, right, they can be attacked, but they're never going to find the submarines.
Yep.
They're going to be all over the place, and then they're going to be able to just cause damage. And we're also building bigger bombs at this time too, right? We detonate the biggest one we ever detonate is a 15 megaton bomb in 1951 called Castle Bravo, which is the biggest yield that the United States ever detonates. We create ones bigger than 15 megatons. We never detonate one bigger than 15 megatons.
Yep. I guess that brings us to, because now we're like talking late 50s and we're on the cusp of 1960s, which is really, as you mentioned at the beginning as well, that was like the heyday of, hey, who's got the bigger missiles? Who's got the bigger guns?
Bigger missiles, more dangerous missiles, all that stuff.
I mean, I think we should talk about the Tsar Bomba, right?
Tsar Bomba, yeah. So this, what do you want to say about?
So
the Tsar Bomba is a huge bomb, the biggest
to
bomb
this day,
ever.
Actually, yeah. So Soviet Union
ever detonated.
Yep, biggest biggest nuclear weapon ever detonated in history was a Soviet device nicknamed Tsar Bomba, or the Tsar's bomb, really. And it was set off on October 30th, 1961. It was 50 megatons, or equal basically to 50 million tons of conventional.
Yeah, they were going to detonate 100 megaton one, but what they realized is it was going to provide too much fallout, and that there was no way for the bomber to get away before they would get caught up in the blast. So they're like, all right, let's try 50 megatons first. Again, keep in mind, at this point, the United States had the biggest one with 15. Yep. And now they're like, you know what, we're going to go to 100. All right, 100 might be too much. Let's go to 50 first. And I think it kind of like freaks everybody out, the Tsar Bomba, when it goes off.
When this goes off, yeah.
Because they kind of realize, all right, what's the real point of this? Like, one, strategically not sure if you can even build ones this big going forward, militarily wise, but it was a uranium-based bomb, uranium-232 fusion tamper, and it detonates and it creates a massive explosion where the United States knew about it instantly.
Oh yeah.
Like as far as knowing what was going on, we had like planes actually following their plane. They were trying to keep it secret, but because of the fallout, and didn't like the shockwave like circle the Earth several times.
Oh, to this day. I mean, this was. I think Russia just officially declassified all the files not that long ago, because that's how it was. It was worse than we even thought.
Yeah, it broke glass like miles away on these islands and stuff like that. Like it was felt like 10 half miles in the sky, right? The altitude of, so it almost blew up the bomb. There's actually pictures of it. They actually have some pictures of it and
Pictures
stuff
are
like that
nuts.
of
Yeah,
it
there's a little video that was
going
released not
off.
that long ago.
Yeah, not too long ago, but it basically freaked people out because it was what they call it was a very clean test. What that means is that it basically used up all the energy. It wasn't like wasted uranium charge and stuff like that. So it worked very, very well. More than 90% of the explosion power was provided by the thermonuclear explosion. It worked really well. Like, oh, this is awesome. It did create a lot of increased radioactivity in the glaciers and stuff like that, where
I mean,
they
there's
found
one village.
that in 2015. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's one village that was like 34, 35 miles away from ground zero when this bomb blew up. And the entire village, 34 miles away, was just wiped out. Buildings gone.
Well, they say it was a 35 kilometer radius that was just totally. You can actually see
Nuts.
it on like a map, like Google Earth, and it's just black. Like it's done. You know.
This, again, ups the ante of our arms race. First was the idea of, okay, you could have ICBMs, but now just the sheer power of what this could do. This brings us to the next level, I would say. I mean, wouldn't, right?
Well, yeah. Well, it shows you that if you can build a 15 megaton bomb, what's the limit, right?
Right.
And you can
Absolutely.
obviously build a 100 megaton because they were going to do that first. And how much megaton they have? They think the United States and Soviet Union or Russia today probably have bombs bigger than that can produce much more of a yield than that today.
Yeah.
It's just they haven't tested them. They don't really test the weapons as much anymore. It's what they're ready, but they still build these things and they still have a bunch. But the idea is it got to a point where, again, we're talking about US has 5,500, they have 6,500. How many do you need to wipe out the world? You don't need that many. Like
Yeah, this kind of brings us closer to.
They both had that. They could blow up the world 13 times over. What's the point? How many times have they blow up the world? Just once.
Yeah. But also, this is the fact that we need to understand that, like, the Tsar Bomba comes out in 1961. Just think of the proximity to the infamous Cuban Missile Crisis, and that's only 1962. Within 1
and
year,
really starts. Yeah, and this is different because this is again before that ICBM. So we all talk about they're putting the missiles in Cuba and everything there, and that's when both sides. And we'll get into the Cuban Missile Crisis another day, right? But
just
very close
brief synopsis, I guess, because that again could be a podcast. But the Cuban Missile Crisis, just a brief synopsis. You have a communist government under Fidel Castro takes over in Cuba. It allies itself with Soviet Union. Soviet Union brings in missiles.
Wants to put missiles there.
Yes, they start building silos.
They basically are there. Yeah.
Yeah. They start building silos with missiles in Cuba off the coast of Florida aimed at the United States. We get evidence of this. President Kennedy goes to national television, says, yeah, this is bad.
And the Russians are saying, listen, you have missiles in Turkey aimed at us, so we're just doing this as a counter, as a deterrent. And then the world holds their breath for 13 days because as the Russian ships are coming over, Kennedy puts a naval blockade around Cuba, right? And what are they going to do? And eventually the Cuban ships do turn around. It's a lot of back channel deals. You have to remember, this is 1962. Like we said, there was no direct line between Moscow and Washington, D.C. Nope. So it was all back channels how these two sides were talking to each other. And that kind of changes. That's why there is a there is a direct line today. If Biden or Putin want to talk to each other, they can directly get in contact with each other. That line still exists. So
I mean, they did. Didn't they have a conversation a few weeks before?
Yeah, not a few weeks before, yeah. So there's a connection. So before, it's a way to kind of try to touch on things before things get out of control. They realize, listen, if we didn't have these backdoor channels, again, we can get into this with the Cuban Missile podcast at some point. I'm surprised we haven't done that already, actually.
Yeah, actually,
but,
do it.
Right. Yeah, I'm like, of all the things we've done. But
so this is close. This is the closest we've ever come to World War
actual
III
nuclear
warfare.
Yeah,
yep.
Actual war. I mean, there's been times when a nuclear weapons almost went off, which I guess we could talk about a little bit.
Yeah, we can talk about broken arrows later. Yeah,
but that can be another thing too. Like I said, but we talking. I said a lot today, huh?
Yeah, we're good.
A lot of ideas come from this.
But this scares
people. It scares people
enough that we have a partial test ban treaty in October 7th, 1963. So all the major world powers basically agree that, all right, these weapons are getting a little intense. The Cuban Missile Crisis, we almost started shooting nukes at each other. So they basically agree that they're going to stop testing nuclear bombs anywhere but underground, right? So
this is just United States and
the major world powers. China's not involved. I know China's not involved,
but this is 1963. China detonates their first nuclear explosion in 1964. So they're right there, and they're still bombing. They're still. They don't sign it, and they're doing theirs in atmosphere and underground.
This is kind of like the first step in like people like, okay, maybe we'll slow down. But still, that doesn't mean that we're gonna stop the arms race. I mean, the USSR, right? Soviet Union develops the anti-ballistic missile system to shoot down inbound U.S. missiles in 1968. So now we're thinking like, all right, let's come up. This is like a precursor to our own Star Wars program later on. But
Yeah.
the USSR is like, we're going to create missiles to shoot down missiles that are flying towards us. Because when you're thinking of an ICBM that's flying with a nuclear warhead across the Earth to get to Soviet Union, that has to go almost into space, essentially. Like,
It goes into space and basically comes back
and then
down.
comes back down. So the idea is that if they could detect this somehow, Soviets created this anti-ballistic missile system to shoot them down, and we followed shortly thereafter with our own version. Very crude at the time, but we have it. And then we have the MIRV technology, also in 1968, that we developed. So it's this idea of sending one missile out that has multiple warheads on it. So it's almost like you send one missile out, and from that one missile, there's a bunch of smaller rockets that come out.
It's like a cluster bomb almost.
Exactly, and it could hit multiple targets from one missile. So like if we could get one nuclear missile out into Soviet space during the Cold War, and not get it shot down, then from that missile, boom, you'll have like 30 little ones that will go over.
Yeah. The idea is you only need, if one of these smaller ones goes, what you see now in nuclear weapons, and we can get more back to the history of it in a second, but you have like the world buster ones, I guess you can call them. You also have one that's used that they talk about more, which are the tactical nuclear weapons. Still stronger than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These are city destroyers, but also tactical ones. Remember, there were even, I'm sure you still remember Atomic Betty. That was like the artillery cannon that shot like an atomic mortar shell almost.
Yep.
But they were we can't really get people away long. The fallout's going to be. They were looking at all different ideas. The only thing that would be dumber would be like an atomic hand grenade. Just kind of throw it and get away, like things like that. But you have other countries you have other treaties that come out, right? You have the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1968 that both sides are going to agree to never acquire nuclear weapons, undertaking to disarm. We're going to actually start to disarm them. But India then conducts its first ever nuclear test in 1974. And then in 1979, I saw this was interesting. In September 22nd, 1979, there's a nuclear explosion in the Indian Ocean. No one really, right around the Cape of Good Hope. And they believe it was conducted by South Africa with the assistance of Israel. And it's also unique because South Africa later on is actually the only country that have nuclear weapons that voluntarily gives them up.
I mean, we've signed so many treaties over the years, really starting with the 70s, right? Yeah, you have the SALT I, the strategic...
SALT I, SALT II, yeah.
Yep, SALT I is 72, SALT II 79, then the INF Treaty in 87, then 1991, START I, 93, START II. It actually goes all the way to 2010, the new START. We should actually get into the MAD, right?
Well, yeah, MAD is a big thing. It was basically our structure for our military strategy up for most of the Cold War, right? MAD, mutually assured destruction, that we're going to have so many weapons, you're going to have so many weapons that we're just going to have the number to be able to wipe each other out. And MAD, as far as being, it's crazy. And that's what kind of the president, particularly, I guess we're fast forwarding a little bit here, but Reagan and Gorbachev kind of look at, right? They kind of realized this at one point, right?
They're like, basically, we have weapons now. That was the idea. By 1970s and 80s, leaders from both sides, really, Soviet Union and the United States, begin to realize that the weapons that we have now created, we actually cannot use.
They're too big, they're too strong, there's too many, and they're expensive to maintain. You have to understand that too, or keep on the ready. Most of the atomic weapons that both countries have, they're not armed. You don't want to keep these things armed. Yep. So like it takes time to assemble them and put them together, have them ready to go, which in a way is good because you don't want them at the. It's not. They always have the thing is a push of a button. There's no red button that you push that all the weapons go off. That doesn't exist. There's a nuclear football is real.
That's kind of scary.
It's a briefcase with the code. Well, it's a briefcase with the codes. What's scary is that at one time it was lost. That's like the scary thing too.
Who does that? Russia has, out of about half of theirs, 2,870 warheads are inactive. They just have them. The United States has over 2,000 that are, again, inactive. They're just hidden. They're somewhere. Like, we don't really use them, nor can we really access them quickly. We just have them.
Well, this is scary, too, is that after the fall of the Soviet Union, they believe they lost over 100 bombs, that they literally don't know where they are.
What?
Upwards of 100 nuclear suitcase bombs, smaller bombs that they're not actually a suitcase, but smaller bombs. And they're thinking that the Soviet Union there's over 100 just lost.
I mean,
where are they?
Think of it this
we
way.
lost a bunch too, but they were
Yeah.
lost in like crashes and stuff. These are the ones at the Cold War falls, right? They were in these different places. That's a lot of bombs. Like
Yeah.
they don't know where they are.
No, but like, and this stems from the idea that the nuclear proliferation, right, reached its peak. You could say the arms race reached its peak at about 70,000 missile-mounted nuclear warheads in 1986. 70,000. That's insane. And now from that point forward, we had, Soviet Union 86 and the United States started to be like, all right, mad, mutual destruction, not going to work. So they started passing these mutual disarmament agreements. First was the main real successful one was the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF in 1987, which severely said, all right, we're going to start taking some of these old things apart, like some of the original weapons that would no longer really applicable or useful because they're old technology, we'll take them apart. So they started doing that. And that's why we have less than 70,000. I mean, they had 70,000 missile mounted nuclear warheads in 1986. Then you have the strategic arms reduction talks that began in the 80s and basically continued on and off. Like that's what we're saying. The start, they're please, the last one was in 2000s, 2010. So we're continuously doing this. Considering the fact that we went from 70,000 to 86 to, as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, about 13,000 in 2022, some of these treaties did actually work. Like we did make the world a little
Yeah, they
safer.
reduced them. They reduced the range of a lot of them. So they are realizing this, and all the countries joined South Africa, like we talked. Did that. Southeast Asia becomes nuclear free. Africa becomes a nuclear free zone. One that is in the talking about Ukraine again in 1996, they become a nuclear free state. They transfer the last of its inherited Soviet nuclear warheads back to Russia to be taken apart.
Yeah,
That was kind of like they kind of agreed to do that.
yeah,
So imagine if Ukraine still had nuclear weapons today,
crazy.
changes the whole situation.
Oh yeah. Do you also remember reading the 1970 Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons? This is interesting. It authorized, essentially, the United Nations Security Council authorizes 5 permanent members, the United States, Russia, China, France, and United Kingdom, to possess nuclear weapons on their territory with no need for justification or explanation. They could just have them,
Yeah,
which
we
is
have them. That's it. Yeah.
yeah. Plus, like we are the Security Council, so it's like yeah, we're gonna choose
Yeah, and
for
that's why a lot
ourselves.
of countries get mad, like a country like North Korea, where they're like, "Well, listen, we should have them if we want to have." It's a very tricky thing. How can one country tell another country not to have them when they have them? And other countries have joined that nuclear club since then, right? We know
Yeah,
that India did, and Pakistan conducts their first one, their test in response to India. North Korea conducts a underground test. They say in October of 2006. Okay,
yeah.
again, you don't hear about it as much as anymore as the massive testing, but every once in a while there'll be something they'll talk about. Or Iran is there are always rumors that Iran is trying to produce nuclear weapons.
And this is all against the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of '96, because it basically proposed that no additional countries be allowed to
Yeah,
create or possess
there's
nuclear weapons.
no yeah. If you have them, you have them. No other countries will have them. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's
Oh,
talk
it's
about
just
some of the numbers. I looked at the peaks here. So as we said earlier, right, United States has about 5,550 nuclear weapons. About 1,800 of those are in strategic deployment. Like you mentioned, they're all over the world and they actually could be used. And another about 3,000 or so, um, based on the one source, are in storage at various sites and in various states of readiness, some more than others. So about 2,000 of those are like hardcore storage. But they could be made available quickly if there's a need for them. Not that there really is, because we started using that, there was no Earth. But this is a fraction of what the U.S. had at its peak. So in 1967, we had
yeah.
31,225 nuclear weapons.
Think about that. So you
That's
can
what? And in '89, we had 22,217.
listen.
And
We did have more than the Soviet Union. We dismantled more than they did also since then.
yeah, yep. And Russia actually obviously downsized their nuclear arsenal as well, but they still possess roughly, over 6,000 warheads. But based on one source that I saw, they say that their strategically deployed and ready to fire number is about 1,625 to ours, which is believed to be about 1,800. But again, we're talking
It
about
doesn't
pretty much the
matter.
same number.
But it doesn't. Once you have, if you don't want one going off, you know
Yeah,
what
I
I
was gonna
mean.
say.
Forget about 1,600. Like, and obviously, one is not going to be wipe everything out. I'm not saying that, but like, you don't want any of these going off because if one goes off, more will. It's not just going to be one and done. Both sides are there's going to be retaliation. That's what Matt is all about, even though it's not really looked at it before. The idea is, why even have these weapons at all? There's a lot of other weapons that can cause a lot of damage. Why have these? Because it can also be an accident. What if an accident happens and one of these weapons go off, or if someone that's transporting these weapons crashes? And there are safeguards for that, but not every safeguard can always necessarily be ready to go. Not necessarily might work.
That's nuts. I mean, like the UK, right, has a stockpile of about 200 nuclear weapons, and 40 of them are continuously deployed in one of their 4 submarines, like just patrolling the the English coast and the English Channel.
Yeah, exactly.
Just ready to go.
Same thing with the American subs, and I'm sure the Russian subs, like they're there, like they're just kind of patrolling and they're turning the keys and that's it. They're just going to fire.
Well, I don't know if there's any such thing as fun facts about nuclear weapons.
And again, this isn't trying to scare people. We're just looking at like the numbers. If anything, it actually is safer now than what it was, in the 40s and the 50s and definitely the 60s. Yeah. So like there are things there. The idea wouldn't like they get back to modern times. Putin saying, "I'm putting the forces on high alert." That's nothing new. That's happened before. And put them on high alert. What does that really mean? That just means that they're making sure those things are manned. Well, they should be manned. They should be people watching these weapons,
right?
Stuff like that a bit more closely. All right. The government, if you read a lot of like their government responses, they're like, he shouldn't have really said that or done that, but it's not really. It doesn't change anything. It's not going to change. It's a scare tactic. It's something that people are definitely aware of, but it's not a policy changer or for anything. Yep. Simply putting them on high alert.
Well, anyway, that's our podcast on nuclear weapons, the history of nuclear weapons. We definitely came up with a lot of different topics we could be doing podcasts on while doing this one.
Yeah, I know. We should have been writing some of those down. But
I know. We never write them down. And we never listen to this podcast after we record it. So this is all lost. All of our ideas are always lost. We got to get a better system, Tommy. We got to work on this.
At some point. Yeah.
At some point. Well, anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in once more to listen to our podcast. If you're new to our podcast, this is what we do. We're 2 history teachers that basically pick a topic or it is suggested to us, and we go out and do our own research at our own time. And the first time we are talking about this topic is right here, right now. So what you're listening to is basically our first conversation on this topic, always, every single week. If you want to contact us, you can find us at www.historyteacherstalkingpodcast.com. Please feel free to email us, leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast, and do not forget to subscribe. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Stay safe, everybody.
I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast, and if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.